still just keeping an eye on things, and I'll move people over as needed.
Great. Well, hey, thanks everybody. Thanks, Sarah. And I'll bang my coffee cup gavel. Welcome to the June 3rd, 2021 Shoreline Preservation Working Group meeting of SANDAG. And before we jump into the meeting, I will ask our working group coordinator to confirm we have a quorum. Sarah, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do have quorum. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everybody. And we're hoping that this is the last ever Zoom meeting of this committee. We'll do everything we power to have it in person, or at least on the beach next time we meet. But I'd like to update the members and the public in our new process for member and public comments. The primary members will be using their cameras and will take live public comments. And just know, all of you have done this, know it's hard to manage this and public comments. So Sarah, if there are public comments or member comments, let me know, because I find it hard to manage agenda, the hands raised, and the two screens. Anyway, primary members are using their cameras and will take live public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras or raise their hands when they have a comment or question, and then I will recognize you to speak. And then Sarah will now provide a quick reminder on how the public comments will work. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. So in addition to email and comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the phone numbers on the cover page of the agenda. When public comments are called for on an item on the Zoom platform, click on the raised hand icon in the Zoom toolbar, which is on the top right of the screen, and the chair will call on you by your name that's provided. And if you are participating via the phone, press *9 on your phone to indicate your desire to speak. And the chair will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. And you'll have to press *6 to unmute. And all comments, whether they were emailed or live, will be made part of today's meeting record. So I'll send it back to you, Meredithina.
Great. Well, hey, thanks. And so all of you are aware this is Sarah's last meeting ever. She's leaving the coolest subcommittee at SANDAG, the coolest coastal management body in the entire planet by far. She's done a great job. So before we start, we want to thank Sarah for doing an amazing job and being really, really just a globally important coastal management specialist, a coastal management guru, and doing such a great job of bringing people together to figure this out in a really smart way. So yeah, can we all give her a round of applause, or we'll give you shakas, but thanks, Sarah, for all the work.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really kind. I should not have read my card from my coworkers prior to jumping on the meeting here, because I'm just trying not to cry. So thank you.
Well, we're going to miss you. And I appreciate the work that, we all really appreciate the work you do at bringing people together and figuring out how to protect and adapt our coast to adapt our coast. So anyway, I know you'll have a great career. You have a great career ahead of you, but well, I'm sure a lot of us will be still working with you. So anyway, and our loss is the city of San Diego's gain. So anyway, and so then since we're in a virtual environment, we aren't going to do full introductions. Instead, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us. We'll get started with item number 2 on the agenda, the approval of the meeting minutes from the March 4th, 2021 meeting. And item 2, are there any public comments on this item?
I'm not seeing any raised hands on this item.
And then are there any member comments on the minutes? Great. May I have a motion to approve this item, please?
LaCava moved.
From Encinitas. I'll go ahead and second that.
Sorry, can you just repeat for the record who was the first and the second? City of San Diego and then Encinitas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I have a motion by, I'm sorry, it was Joe, it was San Diego and then Encinitas?
Correct.
Okay, I'll call on Sarah for the roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Meredithina?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dwight Warden, Delmar?
Yes.
Thank you. City of Carlsbad, Council Member Bob Patel?
Yes.
We have City of Chula Vista is absent. City of Coronado, Council Member Sankey?
Yes, looking for the unmute button, sorry.
Thank you. City of Encinitas, Councilmember Hensy.
Yes.
Thank you. I have National City as absent today. City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Keim.
Yes.
Thank you. City of San Diego, Councilmember LaCava.
Yes.
Thank you. City of Solana Beach, Deputy Mayor Becker.
Yes.
Thank you. I have County of San Diego is absent today. Port of San Diego is absent today, and US Navy, Walter Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you. That passes with those members present.
Great, thank you, everybody. And so now we can move on to item number 3, public comments, communications and member comments. I'll ask members of the public who wish to offer public comment not related to a matter on today's agenda to please raise your hand at this time so we can call you. Any public comments?
Yes, let me just kind of scroll through my list here. And I have up first, Lynn Gilson. Lynn, you should be able to speak now if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm Lynn Gilson. I don't know that many of you have met me or any of you really, but I'm an Encinitas resident. I'm a scientist. I'm a data lover. So I'm really looking forward to today's presentation. And you know, as you know, there is a lot of excitement in parts of Encinitas and Solana Beach surrounding the beach maintenance project that's being done in collaboration with the Army Corps of Engineers. However, since that covers a limited and specific area, it actually serves to kind of beg the question of the intent and the plan for the rest of the vulnerable beachfront in Encinitas and in our neighboring coastal cities. So I wanted to check in with you on the timing of the next regional beach sand project. The last one, RBSP2, was in 2012 and was deemed very successful. And from my personal observation of the beach that I frequent in North Leucadia, it appeared to have an impact for a good 4 to 5 years. So, you know, taking us to about 2016, 2017. But then much of the shoreline beaches seem to have had a net sand deficit, leading to some lower beach elevations, narrowing of the beaches, undercutting of the bluffs. Of course, the tragic bluff collapse at Grandview just 2 summers ago serves as kind of a horrible reminder and creates even greater apprehension. And, you know, I know that that we have to acknowledge that sea level rise is on everybody's mind, and it can lead to this fatalistic feeling like it's out of our direct control. But the sediment management has long been the key issue for the beaches in San Diego County. And if we fail to attend to the beach sand issues that, you know, we the humans have created, we will be exacerbating the effects of sea level rise. And so I think this really makes studious beach maintenance plans even more important. And I'm sure that others here are watching the beaches of concern close to where each of you lives, the way I watch the beach closest to me. And I'm hoping that we can re-energize another regional beach sand project for the beaches that are at risk of becoming so over-eroded that there will soon be no options left for maintaining them. Because I know we all agree that our beach coastline is the biggest asset of our beach communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Any additional public comments?
I don't see any other raised hands.
Great. And do we have any comments from members?
Vice Chair Warden, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, just to alert everybody, the City of Del Mar Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan, which we started working on in 2014, and our City Council adopted it in 2018. It was the first one in the state that had a vulnerability analysis, a risk analysis, and an adaptation strategy. It went to Coastal Commission. They wanted a bunch of changes. We pulled it off, spent a year, give or take, some shutdown with COVID and discussions at the staff-to-staff level about it. It's back on the agenda for next Thursday, June 10th at the Coastal Commission, because the Coastal Act has a clock in it and they have to act on it by then. The recent staff report from Coastal Commission is moved towards what the city wanted, but not completely. There are still a number of issues that are in dispute. And so the outcome is uncertain. Anybody that wants to learn more about it, it's on our website, or our city council is going to have a meeting on Monday, this coming Monday, the 7th, to receive community input from our city on what they want us to do with respect to it, pending it at the Coastal Commission. And it will be at the Coastal Commission on the 10th. So there you have it.
Thanks, Dwight, for that update. I know IB and Del Mar kind of embarked on the same process. You guys just a little ahead of us. So anyway, and I think we're behind you on the Coastal Commission approval. Additional questions or comments? Comments from members? Yep, go ahead.
Yes, hi. I just wanted to briefly tell you guys that Solana Beach did have its first scoop project, and it was hugely successful. We were able to put 20,750 cubic yards of sand on our beach. So that was good news. And a lot of the things that we thought could go wrong didn't go wrong. There was some grunion running at that time, and we were nervous about that. But it turns out the grunion were actually located right where we put the sand. So that was all good news. We didn't have a lot of residents complaining, certainly about the trucks or the closed parking lot. I will tell you, they did comment on when you first put the sand down, how dark it is, and they were upset about that, but then it all washes and it's perfectly great sand now. So that was good news for Solana Beach.
Great, that's good to hear. I look forward to surfing up there on a good south swell. So it's one of my favorite south swell spots to go. I love that beach. So anyway, good. Additional questions or comments? Good. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. We'll move on. Hold on, let me get the agenda back up. And I know Sarah has announcements.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things before we jump into the agenda. So the first update, I just wanted to provide the group with an update regarding the application process to fill the 2 newly created seats on the working group representing the environmental justice, climate equity community, and then the cross-border community. So after some discussion with the chair and the vice chair, SandAg staff have decided to resolicit this application after the adoption of SandAg's regional plan later this year. So, we know that our agency is asking a lot of our community members right now and our community partners at the moment with the ongoing work on the regional plan and our 5 comprehensive multimodal corridor plans as well. So just delaying this process a little bit, another 6 months or so, is going to give the agency a little bit more time to share this opportunity more broadly with the community. And then just the second quick update is on some grant funding that SandAg has been pursuing. Many of you know that SandAg's been working on securing some funding for the planning work that's needed to really kick off another future regional beach sand project for some time now. We did submit a pre-proposal application to the National Fish and Wildlife Fund's National Coastal Resilience Grant Program. It's quite a mouthful. A couple months ago. Unfortunately, we just found out about a week and a half ago that we were not invited to submit a full project proposal. So staff will keep their eyes open and ears open for other potential funding opportunities in the future for that. So that is all I have. I will kick it back to you, Meredith.
Great, thanks again. And thanks for all your service to SandAg and the whole issue of coastal management and protection. We do appreciate it, Sarah. And we're going to miss working with you. I know I will. So anyway, okay, now on to, and just for all of us beach science monitoring nerds, this is as good as it gets. You get the annual beach monitoring shoreline, regional shoreline monitoring program annual report. So for item number 4, and Greg Heron, once again from Coastal Frontiers, is here to provide an update. And I think this is really important information. And SandAg probably has one of the best baselines on, how are we been managing our coast in the state of our coast and anywhere. So really important stuff. So thanks, Greg, for continuing to provide information on this and have some good data so we can make good decisions.
Okay, thank you, Meredith. Let's see if we can get this to work as well as it did during the dry run here. Everyone should see the presentation now.
Yeah, Greg, we see your presentation and no presenter view, so you should be good to go.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the introduction. And again, and thank you, Sarah, for your support and guidance over your tenure here at Sand Egg. We really appreciate it, and we will miss you. So today I'd like to update you on the state of the coast based on last year's shoreline monitoring program. So we're going to be talking about results up to fall 2020. There's often new attendees or members to the working group, so we'll provide some background information to lend some context to the results, so bear with me on that if you've seen it before. And then we'll talk about the results really in terms of sub-reaches within these broader littoral cells that we have, and focus on beach widths and sand volumes. And then at the end, I want to change gears a little bit and touch on beach nourishment and sea level rise adaptation, because we know that's a pretty hot topic. Recall that the study area extends from Oceanside in the north to the US-Mexico border in the south, and includes portions of 3 littoral cells: the Oceanside cell, Mission Beach cell, and Silver Strand cell. And again, for the purpose of our analysis here, we're going to break these cells up into 10 smaller sub-reaches based largely on geographic and municipal boundaries. So for example, Oceanside, Encinitas, Solana Beach, Imperial Beach. Monitoring program's been conducted since 1996. It includes a beach and lagoon entrance component, and we're focusing on the beach component today. The program consists mainly of beach profile surveys at 54 locations between Oceanside and the US-Mexico border. And their surveys are conducted in the fall and the spring, corresponding with the beginning and end of the winter wave season. So we'll expect to see our widest beaches in the fall after a quiescent summer, and our narrowest beaches in the spring after the winter storm season. And we're conducting these surveys from the back beach out beyond the depth of closure. And remember, the depth of closure is that range offshore or depth where we're not really seeing much sand movement anymore under the influence of waves and currents. So a beach profile is effectively a cross section of the beach like you see here. And from that, we can get the mean sea level beach width at the time of the survey, and also calculate that volume of sand in the profile out to that theoretical depth of closure. And we call that the shore zone volume. This slide summarizes the cumulative beach nourishment that's occurred in each of the littoral cells since the mid-1990s. And we see RBSP 1 and 2 there identified by the vertical red lines, providing about 3.6 million cubic yards of material. Now, most of the other material came from sand of opportunity, much like the material that was discussed a few minutes ago at Solana Beach. So this is material from projects that became available from projects whose primary purpose wasn't necessarily beach restoration. So some of the highlights there in the Oceanside cell was about 1.8 million cubic yards from Botaquitos Lagoon restoration in the mid-1990s. More recently, almost 500,000 from San Elijo Lagoon restoration in 2018. Down in the Silver Strand cell, we've had dredging from San Diego Harbor from the Corps of Engineers, and also a Corps of Engineers project in Mission Bay, about 450,000 cubic yards placed on Mission Beach in 2010. So another thing to take away from this graph is we're all too familiar with the concept of flattening the curve from the last year. So when we look at the nourishment rate in the Oceanside cell, we see that that's flattening out, and of course means that we're putting less sand on the beach now than we were in the historical past. Let's look at the last year in review. First, in terms of sediment management, we had some opportunistic nourishment, 56,000 cubic yards placed in the near shore off of Coronado. This is the first such project in Coronado in the last 25 years since we've been keeping track of these nourishment projects. The one in Solana Beach that was just discussed is a 2021 project, so we'll be including that in next year's presentation. We also had sand bypassing at many of the usual locations: Oceanside Harbor, Botaquitos Lagoon, San Dieguito Lagoon, Los Penasquitos. Notably absent there is San Elijo Lagoon, which you recall it's just finishing up with the restoration program. They didn't have to conduct maintenance last year, and we're kind of in a state of flux here. We'll understand more about what their maintenance requirements are in this new configuration in the next couple years. Notably, Botaquitos is only done every 7 to 10 years, so we got a slug of sand from there in 2020. And Oceanside Harbor provided about 200,000 cubic yards more than normal. And that's because every 5 or 6 years, the Corps also dredges at Del Mar Boat Basin, as well as the navigation channel there at the harbor. In terms of environmental conditions, we had slightly above average rainfall and slightly above average stream flow accompanying that. And that means that maybe lagoons have the propensity to stay open naturally a little more than in a drier period. In terms of wave conditions, it was very unexceptional in terms of wave energy index, number of storm events, and the size of the waves during those storm events. Let's talk about program findings. We'll look at the current condition of the beaches and also how they have evolved over the past few decades. We'll focus on 10 subreaches and the changes in beach width and shore zone volume. This slide provides a snapshot of the current beach condition and the changes relative to the pre-RBSP1 condition. That's pre-RBSP1 is 2000, so that's right before Sandex started actively managing the beaches with these regional beach sand programs, as well as scoop projects. I know there's a lot of numbers on this, but the intent is for you to allow you to find your beach and get a quick overview of where you stand. Keep in mind that most of these subreaches have multiple beach profile transects in them. So what we do is we combine them using a weighted average to arrive at one value for each beach, so it's easy to digest. So we see each of the reaches in the left-hand column. The next column is the fall 20 beach width in each of those reaches. And then the change in beach width that we've experienced in this 20-year period since before the RBSP to now. The trend of beach width changes over that 20-year period. And this is not simply dividing the change by 20 years, but we're looking at a linear regression on all of the beach width numbers over that 20-year period. And then finally, the last column is the shore zone volume change over that 20-year period. So if we look at a place like Cardiff, beach is about 250 feet wide now, or in fall 2020. We've had gains of over 100 feet during the post-RBSP period. And beaches have been increasing at a rate of about 5.5 feet per year. Alternatively, at a place like South Carlsbad, fairly narrow beaches, less than 100 feet, we've lost beach width in the last 20 years despite placing sand on those beaches, and we're losing sand at a rate of about 2.5 feet per year. The shore zone volume change numbers are not as intuitive, I think, as the beach width numbers, but generally what you'll see is they kind of go in lockstep together. So at South Carlsbad, losing 46 feet and also losing 48 cubic yards per foot of volume in that entire shore zone. They should typically kind of match along those lines. We do see some areas where they don't. Examples of Del Mar, where we've had modest beach width gains, but a lot of sand volume retained at that reach. And that probably means that a lot of that sand sitting offshore, maybe in that delta from San Dieguito Lagoon. Opposite of that is Imperial Beach, where we have these gains, modest beach width gains on the beach, but we've lost a lot of volume from that system. So that suggests that we've held a lot of it up on the upper beach, but the system as a whole has lost quite a bit of volume. So next, I wanted to look at a couple of representative long-term outcomes that kind of illustrates the range of what we've seen the last couple decades. In this case, we're just looking at one individual transect in some of these areas. And we've tried to, again, capture this range of outcomes, but also be somewhat geographically diverse and show at least one site in each of the littoral cells. So first up, Oceanside Transect 930. This is in the Strand area. And we have beach width measured in every spring and fall from 1996 to fall 20. And there's actually only about 16 transects that go all the way back to the beginning of the program in 1996. So I'm going to focus on those. The solid markers indicate a fall survey, the hollow or a spring survey. So the first thing you'll see is this general trend of typically wider beaches in the fall than in the spring. So you get this sawtooth type pattern. And we see when Regional Beach Sand 1 and Regional Beach Sand 2 went onto the beach, and we see these large gains after each one, followed by this fairly comparable trend of shoreline retreat or erosion. So this beach is really acting like a classic feeder beach where, you know, we're getting gains and benefits for a period of time here when it goes on the beach, but eventually it's moving on down the coast to places like North Carlsbad, Encinitas and whatnot. And we can see that we have had long periods of benefit, but really now at the end, we're pretty close to where we were when we started because the sand's moved out onto other regions. Next up, let's look at South Carlsbad. This is an example of a beach that, even though it's received sand during both regional beach sand projects, it just hasn't been enough to overcome this trend of background erosion that's persisting. One thing that's interesting about this spot in South Carlsbad is these initial losses here that happened before regional beach sand one, that's associated with the 97, 98 El Nino. So it's almost like we took a hit then and can never even really get back or recover from that. So we see that beaches now are about 30, 40 feet narrower than they were in this pre-RBSP1 period. Solana Beach shows a nice example of a beach that has this sustained gains after each of the regional beach sand projects, and in this case also the San Elijo Lagoon Restoration Project. So we see at the end of this multi-decade period, beaches are more than 100 feet wider at Solana Beach than before the first RBSP1. And another beach that looks a lot like this is Cardiff, which also had that San Elijo Lagoon Restoration Project Nourishment in 2018 period as well. Moving down to the Mission Beach littoral cell, the beaches there, we can see this is an example of a place that took sediment during regional beach sand 1, but did not participate in beach sand 2, but did get about close to 500,000 yards from a core project dredging in Mission Bay. So you see these modest gains that were retained after the first project, but it's after the second project that we really sustained better gains. And again, this core project in 2010 was about 3 or 4 times larger than the regional beach sand project. Last spot we'll look at down in the Silver Strand cell, Imperial Beach. This is just south of the pier. First thing that jumps out at me on this one is how large the seasonal signal is between spring and fall surveys. And we can see that we had some modest gains retained after the first beach sand project, which was augmented by some harbor dredging, about 300,000 cubic yards in 2005. Remember, the second regional beach sand project was much larger than the first, so we see these much larger gains. And over this multi-decade period, we see the beaches are about 40 feet wider on average than they were before we started. But it's certainly not as good of an outcome as we saw at Cardiff and Solana Beach, and I'll touch on why I think that is on the next slide. So we saw the outcome really varied by location, and that depended on a lot of things. One is the regional beach sand fill size, and if there were any opportunistic nourishment that went along during that period, particularly something like San Elijo Lagoon Restoration Project, which provided about 500,000 cubic yards between Cardiff and Solana Beach. And then the interaction of adjacent fills. So North Carlsbad in particularly benefited from that material moving down and kind of merging from Oceanside. And then I think we see some areas that seem to have a compartmentalization or retention type characteristics, notably Cardiff, which seems to be bound by the delta at San Elijo Lagoon and Seaside Reef in the south, and Solana Beach, similarly Seaside Reef in the north, and the delta at San Dieguito down in Del Mar in the south. So our most favorable outcomes were at places like North Carlsbad, again, Cardiff and Solana. North Carlsbad has a sediment retention component too, and with the jetties at the north entrance of Agua Hedionda Lagoon. And the least favorable outcomes were at places like South Carlsbad. Okay, switching gears here, let's talk about the role of beach nourishment and sea level rise adaptation based on what we've learned here in San Diego County, but also elsewhere. And I understand this is an important topic to many coastal jurisdictions and is an adaptation strategy in many of the local coastal plans. Unfortunately, here we have a real world case to look at the outcome of beach nourishment and relative sea level rise just up the coast in Orange County. Now, I'm saying relative sea level rise here because we're going to use subsidence of the land as a proxy for sea level rise. And after showing those results, we'll take a first order look at what's required to adapt to sea level rise here, specifically in San Diego County. So when we look at that sea level rise adaptation toolbox, the three basic components are protect, accommodate, and retreat. And beach nourishment really falls under that protect tool. All right, first let me convince you that sea level rise and terrestrial subsidence have the same effect on the coastal zone. So as the sea level rises or the land subsides, you really end up in the same place. Now, as I was putting together some background information to share with you guys, I came across this paper from Doug Inman from about 30 years ago, where he's talking about induced subsidence in California. And in this case, as we'll see in the next couple slides, is from oil extraction, where he's saying that this induced subsidence is, sometimes on the order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude greater than present sea level rise, and an order of magnitude greater than some of the estimated rates of accelerated sea level rise due to greenhouse gas effect. And he's advocating looking at these areas that have experienced a sort of subsidence to gain insight into what problems we may face as sea level rise accelerates. And for those of you who don't know Professor Inman, he was really a giant in the field. And I think most practicing coastal scientists and engineers today can draw their lineage back to probably 3, maybe 4 people, and Doug Inman here at Scripps Institute, his Institution of Oceanography, is one of those people. So it was, to me, it was very interesting that a big thinker like Professor Inman recognized this problem probably well before it got on the radar to the extent that it is today. So the case study I want to talk about is Orange County. And again, this is subsidence due to oil extraction. This is a picture of Huntington Beach at the early part of the last century. And all this oil extraction has led to some subsidence along the coast as that oil has been removed from those wet reservoirs and this land's subsiding to fill that void. It wasn't until like the 1960s that they started with downhole injection of water to try to slow that subsidence. But here, this is a map from of Orange County, Anaheim Bay in the north, Newport Harbor in the south. And you can see up to 4 feet of subsidence here along the coast in this period, 1934 to 1964. Now, as I perused Doug Inman's paper, I saw that he mentioned similar outcomes in places in Orange County, in southern Los Angeles County, where hydrocarbon extraction was pretty prevalent in the early part of the last century. So even though they started with some flooding the reservoir with water in the 60s, we still have subsidence in more recent time. Here's a 10-year period in the 70s, again here in Orange County, and you can see this up to almost a foot of subsidence along the coast in this Huntington Cliffs area. So in many ways, lots of parts of the coast have already experienced this effective relative sea level rise that we're projecting for over the next couple decades in places like San Diego County. So how did they deal with that, or whether or not on purpose or serendipitously? These are beach widths measured in Orange County in various subreaches. We've divided them up much like we did in San Diego County. So we have Surfside, Sunset, Huntington Beach, Bolsa Chica, Newport, all the way down. And during this period, from the mid 60s to the late 90s, is which we have this data on from this project, the Corps placed about 20 million cubic yards of nourishment on the beaches, mainly in the context of that Surfside Sunset project, but also some down in West Newport. And the takeaway here is, if we look at all the trends here, most of these beaches are going up at about 4 feet a year increase in beach width, except for Huntington Cliffs, where most of that subsidence was focused. So there we're only going up at about 1.5 feet a year. So what's happening here is that nourishment material is compensating for that subsidence or relative sea level rise, but it's done so such that it's countered it and still been able to increase beach width some. So it's really just this case study or laboratory just up the beach where we're seeing how nourishment can accommodate or adapt for sea level rise. So let's look at the estimated beach width losses for various sea level rise scenarios here in San Diego County, again, using the sub-reaches that we've talked about earlier. So I've got 3 sea level rise scenarios, 0.26 feet, 1 foot, and 2 foot. So your first question is probably why 0.26 feet? Well, that is the difference between mean sea level in the last 2 tidal datum epochs. So that's that 19-year lunar cycle that NOAA uses to recalibrate the tidal datums. Where's mean lower low water? Where's mean sea level? Every 20 years or so. So this is that's the real difference measure between the epoch from the 60s and the one that went up through about 2001. They're going to release the next tidal datum epoch here probably in the next year or two, and all indications are it's probably going to be on that comparable level. So that's why I chose 0.26 in there. But if we just look at the sea level rise scenario of 1 foot, we're using the concept of equilibrium beach profile, the Bruin rule, and the profile characteristics in each reach to just do an estimate of what the immediate sea level rise or the immediate beach width loss is as that sea level comes up and pushes back the beach. So in that 1 foot scenario, we're looking at losses in that 40 to 80 foot range. When you get into that 2 foot scenario, you're looking at losses in excess of 100 foot. So now let's look at what's the nourishment volume required to counter those losses, just to gain back the losses that we're getting strictly from sea level rise. And again, we're going to use the equilibrium beach profile concept, just like you would in a simple shoreline change model. And we're assuming the profile characteristics for each site, but when we put sand on the beach here, we're assuming that the characteristics are similar to the material that was used for regional beach sand too. So generally coarser than the native material. So keep in mind also that the length of these reaches really affects the total volume required. So I've put those reaches out here next to the links next to the reaches. So for example, Encinitas Leucadia is almost 4 miles long, whereas Cardiff's only 1 mile long. So that's going to affect the amount of sand that goes on there to counteract those beach width losses. So let's just look at the 1 foot scenario. And these are the volumes that would be required to gain back that 40 to 80 foot of beach width loss that's just coming from sea level rise. And what strikes me as I look at this is these numbers aren't a whole lot different than what's been going on the beaches in some of these regional beach sand projects or opportunistic projects like Santa Lucia Lagoon Restoration Project. The one that really stands out is Leucadia Encinitas, and part of that is because of how long that reach is. But also keep in mind with the Corps of Engineers projects that's hopefully going to start here pretty soon. I think they're looking at something like 2.5 million cubic yards in this area over a 50-year project life. When you get into the 2 foot sea level rise scenario, again, more material. But when you consider that, you put 5 million cubic yards on the beach over the last 20 years, and you're trying to catch up or accommodate for sea level rise over a longer horizon, these numbers don't seem completely out of the realm of feasibility if, as a region, San Diego decides that it's worth the cost to maintain those beaches in the state that they are today. So again, we've put about 5 million cubic yards on the beaches since 2001, mainly from regional beach sand 1 and 2, but the region has done a great job exercising scoop permits, getting sand on the beach when they can, even if it's a small amount like what just went on at Solana Beach, or a large amount coming from a lagoon restoration project. And when we look at beach nourishment as an alternative to adapt to sea level rise, we see beach width losses in that 30 to 80 foot range when we get a 1 foot sea level rise scenario. And the amount of sand that needs to go on the beach to counteract that is not a whole lot different than what you guys have been doing already for regional beach sand projects or some of these larger opportunistic projects. So I just wanted to leave you with some of that information, just to put some numbers in your head on what this means and show you that, in other parts of the state, we've kind of gone through this in many ways because of the subsidence, which is effectively relative sea level rise. That's what I wanted to share with you guys today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Hey, thanks, Greg. Absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate having some really concrete, specific numbers about, specific things we can do, and like it makes it, I think it really makes it a lot more digestible and feasible rather than us freaking out. It's like, okay, here's a real tangible sort of, scenario for actually and why these projects work. So I really appreciate that. So yeah, really, really good stuff. So questions, comments from members or attendees? See, Dwight.
Mayor Dedina, sorry to interrupt. Could we
You
do
want to call people, Sarah, then?
let's just do public comment first, and then we'll jump into.
Go ahead. Okay, I didn't have mine. Okay, go ahead.
That's okay. And I'm not seeing any raised hands for public comments. So we can always come back if there are any. So thank you. We can go to member comments. And I think I saw Vice Chair Warden first and then Councilmember Hinsey.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Greg, for a great presentation. My first question is, I hope somebody's going to send us a link to the presentation. I was doing my best to take notes, but I couldn't get it all. Second, what did you find, if anything, about the effect of the lagoon mouths? Are they trapping sand or sending sand out, or how are they affecting the dynamics in North County?
Recently in the drought times, I think I would say trapping sand, but as you saw, pretty much all of these lagoons have a maintenance program where they're dredging and putting material back on the beach. And we keep track of that. And when it's above average, it catches our attention if it's well above average or well below average, and we try to investigate that. The hard part is sometimes lagoon dredging is dictated by funding rather than what's in the lagoon. So if they have more funds in a particular year, they might do a little bit more work. It looks like more came out, which could lead you to believe that more went in, but it's not always the case. So, it's challenging to really understand what those dynamics are. But to your point also, during some of the big rain years, like 97, 98 El Nino, if you look at the beach widths in places like Del Mar, we actually gained beach widths during that El Nino season because we think material came out of some of those lagoons like San Dieguito there at Del Mar.
Thanks. Just one quick follow on. Based on your data, would you then think that those of us who are looking at beach nourishment as part of our sea level rise adaptation need to have a component to deal with this interaction with the lagoons in the areas where we'll be placing sand?
I think my understanding is always a concern of the lagoon entities, and SANDAG has always included a component there to at least assess what those changes are. And that's what we try to do in the annual report. Simply by keeping track of what's happening every year, we're able to at least get a first order understanding if a change in the system, meaning beach nourishment or an El Nino, has changed what their maintenance requirements are. So I think there is some interaction, and it's probably worth considering in a project.
All right, thanks again for a great report. It's really wonderful to have all this great data.
Thanks, Council Member.
Yeah, it was a great report. Thank you for providing us with all that data to make some understandings about our beaches that we're watching. And we talk a lot about sand, but here in Encinitas, we have a pretty persistent presence of cobbles on our beaches and, a berm, particularly during the winter. And so I'm curious to know if you have any insight into how cobbles affect sea level rise and any of the dynamics we should be paying attention to in that regard.
Well, cobbles are not going to affect sea level rise, but they play a role obviously in beach dynamics and beach use. I mean, a lot of people don't want to be out on cobbles. There's some places where cobbles are kind of used as a last line of defense. They're worked into the Cardiff Living Shoreline, for example, underneath the sand berm that's there to hopefully act as a line of defense. And there's also some literature that would suggest that the presence of cobbles, at least in some degrees, can accelerate erosion of sand off of the beach because you get more turbulent flow on the wave swash, uprush and downrush, interacting with those cobbles. So I think we'd all probably prefer to see a sandy beach, but there's some places where cobbles are more prevalent than others. Cardiff used to be mainly cobbles 20 years ago, and the regional beach sand projects and the slurp have really changed that beach a lot.
Thank you.
Councilmember Sankey, go ahead.
Thanks, Sarah. And Greg, thank you very much. I'm actually encouraged by a lot of the stuff I saw in this report today, but I have a lot of compassion for my neighbor to the south. Those numbers for your beach surge look pretty tough. And you did identify the opportunistic 56,000 lump of sand we got for the Coronado Beach related to the Navy dredging. And Walt, thanks for any opportunity you were able to help us out on that. And I know that the Navy beach where the SEALs train at the amphibious base is also a critical part of the shoreline for the Navy. And so I'm kind of curious, when I want to see the report with some more specifics. I absolutely understand covering only the 10 zones that you covered, and I'm interested in more about some specifics for the amphib base in Coronado. And I look forward to the link coming out too. Dwight, great suggestion for that. But I want to share an experience we had recently on a possible opportunistic sand reuse that was related to the Hotel Del construction project. They dug some underground parking, and we were working with the Coastal Commission and the Regional Water Quality Control Board to actually take advantage of that. Our scoop permit had sadly expired, so we needed to jump through some hoops. The Water Quality Control Board was fantastic. The Coastal Commission, on the other hand, came through with requirements related to some cleaning up of and some work that we do on our beach that they didn't want to see us do anymore. And it was in our opinion that the trade-off wasn't enough to modify the way we take care of our beaches and provide for our visitors, and at the same time be able to actually need this sand bad enough right now in our cycle. So as you look at advocating for replenishment projects, particularly opportunistic ones, how can you and your science back up a request by us as a city to say to the Coastal Commission, hey, there's no connection between the cleaning up of the beach of the dead seaweed and this particular sand replenishment, and the sand replenishment is trumps the need to have modifications to the way Coronado takes care of its beaches. That relationship between the need and the desire to get something done seems to kind of gotten in the way of some deliberations at the Coastal Commission that sort of hurt us in the long-term attempts to keep our beaches viable.
Right. I think you have the information for Coronado in the annual reports to form the basis of your arguments for how you're managing your beaches and how things like the beach rack may affect it. We haven't been keeping track of things like beach rack there, but I think you have the starting place to start putting together your data set for that. Now, I also want to say, council member, that we added Coronado as a sub-reach in the annual report this year for the first time, largely because of the opportunistic nourishment you did, but also that we've only got one transect up there.
Okay.
But we added that, so you'll see specific information to Coronado in this year's report. I didn't include it in this presentation because I didn't have enough room on the slide. So
absolutely understand. Don't want to be too specific just to my community because there's a lot in there.
Yeah, and then as far as the Navy SEAL base there, we have a bunch of transects in Imperial Beach up through the antenna array at Silver Strand State Beach, and then there's a huge gap to Coronado, which is one of the tough parts about understanding what goes on in that cell. But as you can imagine, the SEALs don't like us on the beach, and sometimes they don't really like us transiting through the area with our boat. So that's tough. If Walt wants to help us get some transects in there, we'd be glad to do them. Yeah,
the Navy's actually been really helpful on the shark monitoring program that's been going on as well, particularly in terms of making airspace available for drones. So they're being players and partners, and if you need more help with that, I'm sure that Walt and me and anybody else that has connections at the Navy would be happy to do so. And thanks very much. I wish we have a little more historical data, but it's interesting that the sand moves from north to south on the north of Point Loma, it seems, and then it moves from south to north in the cells that we deal with, Serge and I. And the state beach is obviously an asset. So the state of California, I would imagine, which owns 8 or 10 miles of that beach, would really have an interest in the work that's being done down there too. Yeah, and as you bring that up, the sand moving, so much material has been placed at Imperial Beach. We have a hard time tracking it once it leaves Imperial Beach because we have that big gap of coverage between the state beach and Coronado. So right. Well, I know my city stands ready to partner with you on efforts there, and we'd be happy to help. Thanks again for the great report. And again, the news doesn't seem as dire as I would have thought. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Other additional, I don't see any of your hands up. Are there other hands up? Questions, comments?
I've got one more if I might. Greg,
Sure.
can you comment briefly on sand size and coarseness in terms of its retention ability? And is that the difference between South Carlsbad, which did poorly, and a place like Solana Beach that didn't?
That's a good question. And we try to touch on that in the reports, but what we found is coarser's better. I mean, coarser fill, bigger fill is going to last longer. In the first regional beach sand project, there was a pretty wide range of grain sizes that made it onto the beach, you know, as small as about 0.19 millimeters, I believe, hit Solana Beach. Despite that, you saw that stair-step plot at Solana Beach. It held on to a lot of that sand. The second project had much coarser, more consistent sand in that 0.5, 0.6 range. And so that stuck around on the beaches in the early stages longer. Our problem there was that we had that big El Nino come about 4 years in. And so it did take away a lot of that sand off the beach and disperse it. We've retained some of the volume, but you know, it's important to remember that those beaches were wide when that El Nino hit. So we had the waves that during that El Nino, but we didn't have a whole lot of coastal infrastructure damage because we had that buffer out there. But yeah, coarser is better. And so when we ran these scenarios, Councilmember Warden, for the how much sand you need to accommodate this beach width losses, we assume that it was that coarser sand like we had from RBSB2, which is beneficial. Well, there would have been bigger numbers if we would have assumed it's the same as native size or finer sand.
Thank you.
Oh, we have some attendees. We have Lynn Gilson.
Thanks. Let me just unmute. So we've
Oh,
got a couple, that's okay. We've got a couple members from the public. So Lynn, let me just see if I can unmute you. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Great presentation. And quick question on the idea of the transects you've been using. I wonder, so based on the presentation, kind of Leucadia and the rest of Encinitas are somewhat lumped together. And now that there is going to be this project with the Army Corps of Engineer that works for, you know, Beacons Beach down to Swami's, that's going to be quite different than, you know, about 23% of Encinitas is North Leucadia, that's north of Beacons and goes into South Carlsbad. So will we be breaking those transects out now?
That might be something to consider. You know, what we're calling Leucadia Encinitas is goes from essentially south of Badaquias Lagoon to Moonlight Beach. That's the range of transects we had, and then we jumped down to Cardiff because we have 3 transects in that crescentic kind of area there where the road's right on the beach. And I don't keep track of the next 2 transects, which are at Solana and at Pipes in San Elijo, because I just don't feel like we have enough coverage in there. But you know, we do have enough coverage to call it its own sub-reach, but we do have those transects, and we'll be keeping an eye on how that sand moves around for that Encinitas Solana Beach project.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like it's going to be important for us in Encinitas. I mean, I am north of, for example, Beacons Beach. And so when that sand moves south, it really isn't going to affect, you know, my area at all. And it would be, I think, good to be able to distinguish these 2 areas of Encinitas, because they are definitely not going to be treated equivalently.
Yeah, I mean, remember, we have the individual transects, and what I've been showing here and oftentimes in the report as I try to pull them into these sub-reaches just so that they're digestible. Otherwise,
sure,
you know, going through 50 different transects and the details of that is I think you can get lost in the details.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we did have one other member of the public that had raised their hand. John Conover, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Great. Yeah, first of all, thanks everyone for staying busy on this for so long. I haven't lived here steadily in the last 20 years, but I've lived in the area for 40 years. And Sarah, congratulations. Where's the party?
This is our virtual party today.
That's it? Okay, Greg, I have a couple of questions. Was from you guys, I still see them out there. Do they think 2021 winter was normal or more active or less and losing sand?
Well, I think we'll have a better idea of that once we start working up the data for the next year. We just finished the spring survey a couple weeks ago. I have not even processed those data. And then the fall survey coming up in a couple months is important too, because that's usually the one we try to benchmark our long-term and annual changes on.
Right.
And it did seem to be a fairly energetic winter with a lot of swells. But as I looked at the sea dip gauge at Oceanside, it didn't seem to be playing out so much in the wave measurements. But again, at the end of the monitoring year, which is October, we'll work up those wave data too and look at the energy index compared to prior years and the number of storm events and whatnot,
right,
to get a gauge on that.
I can't tell except for going down to the beach and looking at it. And I spent a lot of time at Seaside and then Ponto, which is real near my home, really changed drastically this spring and kind of got me active in this whole thing and see what I can do ongoingly. I have another question on the sea level rise. Are you guys using a time frame for the plus half a foot, plus 1 foot, plus 2 feet? Because I didn't see that. Maybe I just missed that.
I just use those as round benchmark numbers, and when we get there, there's been lots of work done on trying to estimate when we're going to get there in different sea level rise scenarios, different greenhouse gas scenarios. But you can find a lot of that guidance from the California Coastal Commission. They have some of those curves, and the Army Corps of Engineers has some of those curves as well. So it's really going to depend on which of these scenarios is closest to reality.
Right. Lastly, my biggest concern is when we might have another severe winter, like an El Nino period. And maybe how far out that information is available, or does that just occur in a short period of time and all of a sudden in the fall we're expecting a tough winter?
Yeah, so NOAA keeps track of that based on sea surface temperatures and whether or not we're in a El Nino or a La Nina cycle. So they have months worth of notice, I guess. So they knew that the last 2015-16 El Nino was going to be fairly large. Remember, it was called the Godzilla El Nino in the press. But typically an El Nino historically has been every 7 years, I guess, on average, I think is the number. But the big ones, the really big ones that we've had that have done damage, that really strong El Ninos, 82, 83, 97, right, 98, 2015, 16.
Right.
But there was one in 2010 that was a moderate to large El Nino, and there was a fair bit of erosion that year too. So it's not just the huge ones that can cause us issues.
So if I can ask a general question, it's not on the agenda, but I'm kind of interested, or very interested, how we can get enough money to do a large project and plan for having that money occur every 10 years or so we stay in line for taking care of our beaches. Is there anything we can do or anything in the works for that?
That's like a sand egg. I think that's $30 million question. I'm going to kick that one to Sarah. It's policy.
Yeah, tough one for you, Sarah.
Thanks, Greg, for kicking that back. Yeah, we've been kind of keeping our eye on funding sources, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I've tried my darndest over the last 4 or 5 years here to be applying for some funding to kind of get some stuff going, and we just haven't had luck yet. So, it's something that the agency will keep looking at grant funding for, and there is a lot of pending legislation at the state coming out that is related to sea level rise and adaptation planning, green solutions, these things. And so, I see that there's going to be more money coming potentially. It's just we're competing with a lot of other people in the state for those things. So Mayor Dedina, just to kind of come back to you, and we've got a couple hands raised. We had one more public comment, and then we've got a couple panelists. So who would you like to go to next?
Let's get to the public. Remember the public first.
Okay.
For a while.
And I'll just say, Jeremy Smith, I'm going to unmute you if you can keep yourself to about 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that should be fine. Nice presentation, Greg. I was curious what went into the depth of closure estimates for those nourishment volume estimates, and how confident we feel about those.
A good question. So how we do that is we use a method called statistical depth of closure. So we're looking at multiple years of profile data collected. And essentially when you look at these, you'll see that the profiles are going to pinch out at some point. And instead of just arbitrarily choosing the depth of closure or range of closure where it pinches out, we look at the standard deviation of profile elevations along the range. And once that standard deviation dips below 1/2 foot and stays below 1/2 foot, we call that the statistical range of closure. And we're choosing that 1/2 foot because that's about the accuracy of the bathymetric portion of the survey. So we're trying to separate real profile changes from noise. And so that's how we come up with that depth of closure. If you look in the report, that method is described, and it'll have the depth of closure and range of closure for each one of the transects.
Great, yeah, thanks. Because those volumes would ultimately be pretty sensitive on those estimates, right? If the depth of closure was twice as deep, then the volume would be twice as big, right?
Maybe not twice as big, but it will increase because the equilibrium profile method that we're using to make these estimates for not only beach width losses, but how much volume you need to put back is based on the profile characteristics, which is a function of berm height, depth of closure, and grain size.
Got it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So we're back to our working group members. We've got 3 hands raised. So we'll go with Mayor Sanchez first, and then Mayor Gasterland, and then Councilmember Hensey.
Thank you very much. I wanted to bring up on a call with the League of California Cities, there was some discussion about, the $100 billion surplus at the state level, and what we can do to urge spending some of that money down. Apparently 16 billion has to be spent as quickly as possible because it's over some kind of requirement. But there were some suggestions about supporting like mandates, like what's happening right now with organics recycling. Could we do this? Could we also together as Shoreline send a letter to our state representatives requesting this, a program, maybe a 10-year program or something like that? I know last time we talked about when we were talking about this as a regional program, sand replenishment regional program, it was like 5-year in time levels. Maybe we could get 2 out of this or something like that. That was in response to someone bringing up, well, what are the possibilities of getting funding? I mean, there is a surplus right now, and this is something that would be really fantastic for us to get together and through SANDAG and maybe League, California Cities do something to get some funding here.
Just at least from my perspective, I thought there was some pretty large amounts in the budget for sea level rise adaptation, sort of like sea level rise coastal, coastal climate related issues that I thought potentially would be, sources of funding for these types of projects. Sorry, did you see that? That's what I thought, that, there's talking about billions of dollars that were in the budget that could be possibly used for these projects.
Yeah, I will. I'll follow up with our government relations staff. I was involved in a couple of conversations regarding this funding, but I don't have all the details kind of off the top of my head. but there was some coordination with the other MPOs in California about, how we could tap into this funding for climate adaptation work. And of course, beach sand nourishment could be a project that, that might come out of that. So I'll follow up. And if for some reason I'm unable to get details out to you all today, I'll tap one of my colleagues to make sure that they follow up with the working group on that information.
Yeah, who are you going to be leaving us with, Sarah?
my wonderful team will be here to take care of all of you. Anna Lowe will be your point of contact for the time being.
Thank you.
Great. Shall I go next? So this question is mostly for Greg. Greg, sorry, I had to join the meeting late, so I didn't see your presentation, but I see it's being recorded, so I'm going to watch it. So forgive me if you've already answered my question. So I'm interested in the hidden sand, the sand that's in the sediment behind the Lake Hodges Dam and the sand in the sediment behind the Henshaw Dam. We know from our colleagues at UC Santa Cruz that there are millions of cubic yards of sand behind both those dams. And then the other hidden sand is offshore, especially off Del Mar. We know that there's a system of sand where it flows offshore and flows back onshore. So my question to you is, how accurate, how reliable, how updated are your metrics on the hidden sand, those sources? And what are your thoughts on tapping into those dam sand?
I think any sand that you can get on the beach is a bonus. And I think that if I recall in some of the early sediment management work, and I believe Chris Webb at Moffitt Nickel, if he's on the line, he might comment on this. They tried to locate and categorize all of that potentially available material. And as you guys, I know most of you guys know this, but one of the reasons that we have erosion problems is that we've dammed up
rivers,
a lot of the rivers and channelized a lot of them. So, it's a problem for the beach communities, but it's also a problem that the upland communities are somewhat complicit in, because they're not their neighborhoods aren't flooding because of these dams and
right,
and flood control measures. So yeah, to the extent that that could be brought to the beach, I mean, there's obviously challenges with distances and changes in the flood control measures, and you got to make sure it's the right sand as far as grain size and it's chemically okay. But yeah, that's great. And as far as offshore sand, that's been the way SandAg has chosen to get sand for their projects, and it's also the way that the Corps does it up at Surfside Sunset. There is sand available offshore, and the key again is get it outside of that depth of closure, so that you're bringing new sand to the system, not just moving sand around that's already there. And I think there's still a fair bit of sand left in North County, and then in Mission, off of Mission Beach, there's an enormous quantity of sand available for the region.
Great. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate the observation in part for Mayor Sanchez, who's here, that all the sand that you all put on the beach in Oceanside comes to Del Mar via Encinitas and Solana Beach. So I'm seeing Kelly here, I'm seeing you, I'm seeing Christy. So we're going to want to be, in close link step, on sand. We're one system when it comes to our sand.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, my second one is just to kind of drill in on some of the comments that Lynn made earlier about the need to understand the subsystems within the greater Encinitas Leucadia system. So it sounds like, Greg, you have your transects, the Army Corps is going to have their transects, and I believe Scripps has their transects too. So my comment is mostly just trying to understand the differences and to just communicate the importance that we're using as much data as we have available to us to monitor the persistence and the effects of the Army Corps sand replenishment, because I think that whatever we find is going to be of significance to the whole region.
Good questions. And my understanding is the Corps of Engineers is going to rely heavily on the transects that are already being sponsored by SandAg and the city of Encinitas. I think there's maybe one or two more that they're adding that were previously in the SandAg program when it was larger, designed, really to keep track of the RBSP2. And there's a couple of reasons for that, because many of these transects have data going back 25, 30, 40 years. So that historical record is invaluable as opposed to establishing a brand new site and not having the history on what's going on the beach. So I think you have a lot of what's in place already to understand what's going on with that project. And more is always better, but there's a balance between science and economy as well. But I think Sandag and the city in particular have done a great job in maintaining these programs over a long period so that we can draw those conclusions. And there may be someone from Scripps on the line that may speak to this, but I think my feeling is that the Sandag and city programs of these longer term complements what Scripps are doing, which tend to be more focused in area and more frequent in time, trying to keep track of these changes in a smaller area and with more detail. But it goes nicely hand in hand with this long-term record that Sandag and the city have developed through sponsoring the Shoreline Monitoring Program.
That's great. That's really encouraging to hear. Thank you.
I think I'm the last to speak. This is Deputy Mayor Ryan Keim from Oceanside.
Yep, go ahead.
I want to take a second to support Mayor Sanchez's comments. I don't think we can ask enough. Obviously, this is a critical issue. Yeah, so any way that we can get extra funding for any project we can get going soon would be a huge help to our city. So thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up. I think it's well worth asking again.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions or comments from anybody? We're not missing anybody, Sarah?
I'm not seeing any other raised hands at this time.
Yeah, no, I think on the funding issue, first, thanks, Greg. Really good discussion, and thanks for all the comments and feedback. It's obviously we're all on the same page, and if you start looking back at the Sandag projects, really cost effective, and an example of really great regional collaboration that had a positive impact. And I think we're in a good position to frame and set up projects that could get funded. I also think the success of Cardiff and the integrated nature of the lagoon restoration plus living shoreline and the fact that you have data, Greg, to point out that it's actually the beach is doing well there, I think just puts us all in a good position to really integrate these, whether it's the oceanside dredging, but combined with, and whether it's the same thing in IB where we have to integrate Tijuana river mouth protection in terms of making sure projects don't adversely impact the Tijuana river mouth, and we could potentially do dredging there as well. The same thing in every lagoon mouth, and sand projects just sets us up for climate adaptation and sea level rise adaptation projects. I mean, as good as it gets. And I think we have the data to back that up. So I think it's up to us to figure out how to work on that. And I think Mayor Sanchez, you're right. Let's look at how we can do some more regional lobbying or advocacy to put this on the agenda, right? But I do think there's an opportunity to get some state funding for this, because I think we have, almost shovel-ready projects, right? I mean, I think we can make things happen. Good. Well, it sounds like we solved the sea level rise problem today, so that's good. I think Del Mar's in a good position to get their plan approved. But again, I do think Gary Griggs said this and at a conference at UC Irvine. I think a few years ago, in 2014, there was a lot of not even panic, but just this idea that we had to get this done immediately. And I think Dr. Griggs, who's the foremost authority, one of the foremost authorities on sea level rise and helped write the Coastal Commission sea level rise guidance, really talked about we have time and that we can start addressing this. And I think these projects give us the most cost-effective way. Obviously, we have to do a lot more things, and we've been lucky. I'm assuming, Greg, that we haven't had the types of El Nino storms we had in the 80s and 90s in a while. It's clear, at least on our beach, and I look at the Silver Strand and Coronado Bill, Senke, they got hammered in the spring as well as a winter. It's the Silver Strand and Coronado has really got scooped out in a way that I haven't seen before, or at least in a while. So, we've got some challenges, but definitely it's clear that, these projects, regional projects do work. So, and buy us a lot of time. Anyway, with that, Sarah, any additional comments or things you want to say?
No, thank you all for the discussion today. Thank you, Greg. You know, we always look forward to your report annually. It's really nice to see how these things track over time. And I'll just say thank you to the group again one more time for a great 6 years. I know there's going to be a lot of good that comes out of this group and the staff that kind of takes on my position. So looking forward to being a part of it tangentially as we all move forward. So Mayor Nadina, I'll let you go ahead and close out the meeting if there's no other comments.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. This wraps up the agenda for today. And our next meeting will be, in theory, September 2nd, 2021 at 11:30, but I'll make sure that we do it so we can all meet together. And if that has to be in a tarp at the beach, at the seaside parking lot, like we did it before, or another cool spot on the beach, we'll figure it out. But we're definitely a lot better when we can meet in person. So I'm glad everyone's getting vaccinated and we're moving forward. So anyway, with that, have a great summer at the beach and enjoy yourselves and stay safe. So, and thanks, Sarah, again, for all your service. You have made a big difference and we really will miss you. So thank you.
Yeah, Sarah, yay. Best of luck.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
You.
Thank you. Be safe.
Bye.